Raise your hand, probably not that many people, but maybe a few. Who went to the SVG Esports Production Forum in Los Angeles in November? About a dozen people. All right, so a lot of the discussion at that event, which was a pretty damn good event if I do say so myself. I was pretty excited about that one. Really focused on the idea that we shouldn't be generalizing esports so much. With the idea of a League of Legends match being compared and saying that it's the same as a Rocket League match, as a MLB Home Run Derby VR match, is ridiculous. That's like saying it's the same to produce a tennis match and a football match. So what do? We have a panel in which we compare all of the same things from esports. We do exactly what we shouldn't be doing. But we only have 45 minutes, so that's what the goal is today, to try to give a little bit of an overview on what we spent an entire day on in Los Angeles about a month ago. I encourage everybody to ask some questions. It is a developing but very exciting sector of the industry, and from a production perspective, there's just so much going on. Having kind of thrown myself into this, the technology is just fascinating. But to throw on some numbers with Jeff, I mean, supposedly by various estimates, and there's so many studies in terms of the worth of the market right now, but there's many that estimated that 2 years ago it was about worth about $500 million, the esports industry. Last year about $655 million. This year probably going to beat $1 billion, and you can see where those numbers are going. And then once the larger, more established media companies really continue to buy in, it's expected to explode. So this isn't an if, it's a when, and it's really more of an already. This is as big as anything in terms of viewership. More people are watching, you know, some of the just average everyday League of Legends matches on a Wednesday night than would be watching Major League Baseball on their local RSN. So the viewership is there, the technology is there, and we're going to talk about it a little bit here. First of all, I want to get an overview of each of your guys' operations. Mitch, let's start with you. Since Riot is, you know, one of the biggest players in this industry, we've seen League of Legends Championship Series really explode. You guys have built out a pretty phenomenal operation, and it concludes each year with a event all over the world, but this year it was in Korea with the World Championships that draws ridiculous numbers. I think you said over 100 million views already for one of the main things, right?
So the actual viewership numbers are still being compiled, but one of the things we're going to show the clip in a little while, we actually created our own K-pop band.
Right.
We just
well, let's not blow it. Yeah,
okay.
let's throw it up there. This is really cool when it comes to AR. So let's see Mitch's clip.
The stage is set. The curtain is drawn. The World's 2018 Grand Final.
Europe watched a Korea final in Europe. China watched a Korea final in China. Guess what Korea gets to watch?
I can't expect to win every single Worlds, but this one in particular, this one is ours.
누가 더 갈망하냐? 이 차일 것 같아. 제가 더 우승컵을 많이 받을 것 같아.
Cap's trying to get himself away, but he's only going to be postponing the inevitable. And Invictus Gaming lead this series 1-0. It's not him they're worried about. It should be that support. The Emperor's Divide going to keep him alive for now. And the double kill over to Ning. As now it's Rookie who will scatter the weak to the wind. Fnatic make their last stand here. Vanguard's Edge finds its way onto that Fnatic top laner. It's a double kill over to the Shy. And Invictus Gaming will continue their push. Caps and Soaz make their way into the fight. But Jackie's already dominating. Rookie's able to find the lockdown. The damage comes through. It's Jackie Love. The Crownless are finally king. And Invictus Gaming are your 2018 World Champion.
Sweet, very cool. So at the top we saw some of that AR, but explain kind of what we saw there and all the development that went into that.
So at Riot, especially over the last 2-3 years, we've really been trying to combine the sports component with the entertainment part, with the esports component. So in Korea, K-pop's a big deal. So we actually created our own K-pop group, and the video itself just crossed 100 million views globally.
Right. And the in-game K-pop group combining with real-life dancers, and I mean, to be frank, if you look at it, you know, briefly, you can't tell what's what. Yeah.
And that was the big thing. Like everyone's like, was that real or not? But yeah, 100%. Like we have a great creative team at Riot, and they absolutely crushed it.
Right. And just a quick overview of that production as a whole. I mean, it goes on, that's just the finale of a much larger event that takes place in several cities, and a lot of it, for you at least, is run back home in LA.
Correct. For this show particularly, it's a 6-week competition. It was 4 different cities, world feed and English feed, both done out of LA. But then China was also going remote production. Ideally, for what we're looking to do going forward is build out a remote kit for EU, North America, and Asia, so we can go remote no matter where we are in the world and try to keep people a little healthy at the same time.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about at-home production the last 2 days, and you guys are pushing the envelope there as much as anybody, so we'll get into some more detail on that as well. And then over the weekend, you had your All-Star event in Vegas at the recently renamed HyperX Arena. Is that what it's called, right?
Yep, it was a great event. Normal, like the last couple of years, we've done the event out of our North America studio. This time we actually took it out. It was the team over at Allied was amazing, and it's really nice going somewhere where you don't have to explain esports at the actual venue itself. It was a major success. Pros had a great time. Fan response so far has been amazing.
I think you had said when I was writing a story on it, you said it's nice to not have to tell people what an observer is.
Correct.
Right? So we'll tell a lot of people here what an observer is here in a sec. But Ben, I want to go to you next. ELEAGUE has been around for a few years now, continuing to evolve. I think most would agree very different today than it was when it first started. Talk a little bit about how your guys' operation has evolved and some of the key events you guys have done, both in the studio as well as on the road.
Absolutely. So 2018 was a very rewarding year for ELEAGUE. It started with the Boston Major, and this is the crowning event for the CSGO, community. The best teams in the world gather, and at the end, the champion is the best team in the world. Well, this year, we took our production to Boston for the grand finals, and there the underdog, the North American underdog, Cloud9, took on the most expensive CSGO team ever assembled. I mean, it was a beautiful story to tell up in Boston. The team did an excellent job putting together this remote broadcast, this remote stream, and in the end, Cloud9 walked away with the first ever North American championship. This year, it's been kind of hailed or rewarded as the esports moment, or one of the esports moment, this Cinderella story, where a North American team wins in Boston. And we, thanks to the team that put it on, the success was measured with the most watched ever Twitch channel, concurrent viewers. We set the record at 1.13 million concurrent viewers, which is kind of funny because it broke the record we had set the year before at the Atlanta Major, where it was just over 1 million viewers on one single concurrence on one channel. And one of the ways you ask how we've evolved, in the past we had kind of a live broadcast both on TBS and on Twitch, so linear and digital. Well, this year we evolved a little bit over the last year and a half to kind of tell different stories to where the audience is. So an example is for our major, we told the story live. Sometimes it would be 12 hours of streaming, 8 hours of streaming, the entire game uninterrupted. But then for TBS, what we did is we had a docuseries, and this docuseries basically followed the teams from their training camp all the way through to raising the trophy. And so we've continued to do that throughout the year, is kind of develop what are the stories that we tell on linear, what are the stories we tell on digital streaming experiences, and that's kind of how ELEAGUE has evolved this year throughout our products, choosing which story, which parts of the competition work best for linear, and which work best for digital.
Well, you brought a clip. Let's get a look at some of the things that you guys have done this year.
This is madness. The energy, you can feel it.
Join us in making esports history.
Let's make some noise.
Dewey is going absolutely crazy. Cloud9 are your ELEAGUE major champions.
You shouldn't have started with that. I didn't start anything. You put it up. We can start right now.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Look at that violent panda!
He glues it to the wall, slams it in. What a play!
G2 are the ELEAGUE champions. Let's see what you think at home on social media. We've been joined by a giant cat on the desk.
The sweep, the crowd.
That's gotta make you feel good. Perfection from beginning to end.
Ain't over till it's over.
What a world we live in.
Cool, and you guys have pushed AR too, similar to what Mitch was talking about in studio, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it really comes down to sort of blending those two worlds, right? The in-game and the real world. Marc, with Simplynew, you guys played an integral role in one of the more exciting storylines, I think, of esports this year, and that's the launch of the Esports Arena in Arlington. One of, if not the biggest commitments by a municipality to esports, saying, you know, we're going to put money behind this, we're going to invest. Talk a little bit about your role in the project, but the project overall and what some of the goals are there with Esports Arena Arlington.
Well, it was good to see you. Thanks for having me. And Arlington is a really unique project. You know, as you mentioned, you have this municipality that is basically taking an existing convention center and they're converting it over, or they did convert it over into a dedicated esports facility. And that's really important. You know, when you build a baseball stadium, it's built for baseball. When you build a football stadium, it's for football, and so on. And I think you know, my colleagues could probably attest to this. A lot of times they're walking into these basketball arenas or football arenas. They're not really designed for the experience of esports, and they have to temporarily bring that into the facility. With Arlington, you have a really unique property because everything that Engage wanted to do there was truly about the experience for not only the fans, but also the players, to make it a very comfortable environment for them, to make it a very welcoming environment, to have a very community-oriented environment. And that's why it was a real pleasure to work on that, because this was a facility for gamers, built by gamers. And the Engage, Jonathan Uthan, who's behind that, is a former, you know, champion player himself, right. Shoutcaster and so on. They got Corey Dunn down there, who's a former Shoutcaster as well. These are really just dedicated guys to the space, and that makes all the difference in the world. So yeah, unique project in the sense that the city paid for it, but I think they've already booked out, you know, their opening weekend with Face It. We had Rocket League in there 2 weeks ago. Got, I think, 4 other events this month, so I think they're going to make their money back.
Right, yeah, it's getting off to a good start.
Yeah, it's up to a great start.
Yeah, and I think we got a look at the project a little bit here, right?
Yeah, this is just a press clip. They haven't done an official video yet because it's brand new.
We are opening the largest and best esports stadium in America.
At 100,000 square feet, we almost 3 times larger than the next one that would sit next to us. So the opportunity we have here, we've definitely raised the bar, and you know, other organizations or cities or teams or what have you are going to have a long way to catch up to us.
The esports stadium is going to offer a whole bunch of opportunities in the industry. We're going to have gamers all over the place, from the world coming here to play. It's going to offer jobs for casters, graphic designers. It's just going to offer a whole bunch of opportunity.
This is a truly multi-use facility, so where you can actually activate, you know, anything from rock concerts to State of the Union addresses or conferences, etc. The sky's the limit. What we've created with the technology barrier here, it's, you know, this is the ceiling, and producing anything else is much easier.
It was one of the greatest achievements that we have come to in the esports in Arlington. We've taken a step forward in the industry.
Cool. I can't wait to make my way down there and check it out.
Yeah, I'm hopeful all these guys do some events down there. So start booking it now.
Yeah, there you go. Certainly not last but not least, Jamie Leece at Major League Baseball, having experienced some of this firsthand at MLB All-Star Game. You guys launched Home Run Derby VR prior to this season in one of your first leaps into the esports space. So just tell us a little bit about the project, what some of the goals were, and how this first season went.
So we built Home Run Derby VR for the All-Star Game in 2017 in Miami, and it was a fan engagement experience. You know, the Fan Fest is a multi-day event. the biggest event for baseball fans to come and see all things baseball over multiple days at the home of the All-Star Game. And what we found was there was an incredible amount of engagement. The lines were significant. Everybody was happy. And what was really interesting is that we had a lot of people lining up just to watch the simulcast of the experience that people had in the cages. Because virtual reality, a lot of times you'll see people and they'll be sitting there and they'll be looking around. You have no idea what they're doing. And you kind of look at it and say, well, that's kind of odd. I don't want to look uncomfortable, so I'm not going to wait in line and do it. What we do is we have the screens around the cages and people can actually watch the home runs being hit. And it feels very much like you're watching the home run derby on ESPN, at the All-Star Game. So after taking that all in, we said, let's do something bigger for next year. So this was, and then at the Washington Nationals this year. And we created a contest, multi-day qualifier. Local fans would, free to enter, put up a big score, and we picked the top 32 people to come back on the final day, the Monday before the home run derby, and bracketed no different than we would have done that night when Bryce Harper won, and had fans compete against each other of all ages, and it was an incredible moment. Crowned a champion from right here from Staten Island. He went head-to-head against it was Chuck and Coop head-to-head, and Chuck won. 2 9-year-olds from 2 parts of the country just coming together for the love of baseball and being able to do what their heroes would do a few short hours later across the street.
And I was there, and the crowd was pretty solid and really into it. I thought the engagement was pretty phenomenal. It wasn't just people kind of going on a lark. I think people got into it.
Yeah, no, locally there was a lot of engagement at the Fan Fest, and what we were surprised about was the engagement we had online as well. When we did this thing, we said, we'll broadcast this on Twitch. We really didn't have an active Twitch channel for the MLB Games Group. We figured we'll put it up there, we'll market a little bit, maybe do a little advertising, let people see what's going on. And when we launched, somebody was, I was like, where are we at? And they're like, oh, we're at 3. I'm like, wow, that's really low. My mom's watching maybe or whatever. And they're, no, 3,000. I'm like, what are you talking about, 3,000? And before we were able to even start communicating the numbers, we were up to 30,000, 60,000 concurrents. We grew through the course of the 3-hour stream, and we peaked at 120,000. Actually, we were taking screenshots to share with the senior execs because we were number 2 behind Ninja the whole afternoon. Right. We actually ended up beating him in the final. At the end, we beat him by just slightly going past him. I thought it would have been a great moment just to show that we were in the conversation. Right. It was pretty exciting.
After you explained to the execs who Ninja was.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly.
So I want to get into this from a production perspective. And Mitch and Ben, I'll start with you guys. From a very basic level, what are the biggest differences between producing a live esports event and producing a traditional stick and ball sport? And we're going to have to make a lot of generalizations here, but do your best and maybe start with the observer room and work your way out from there.
Being in New York and as a Yankee fan, like when you go and do an esports event, you actually need to bring in the digital field. You're not just going to set up your cameras and doing the broadcast. You're actually going to have the digital environment that you're going to be operating within, and then that brings a whole other technical challenge. If you're going to do it back, even before I got to Riot, we've had issues where we were doing the show on an online server, where there's a lot of bad people out there that want to do a lot of bad things to you, and sometimes they succeed. So like for Riot, we had to build the offline server. So you're literally bringing your digital environment on the road with you at that point. Right. And part of that is then at that point you need the observers. An observer at the end of the day, it's an in-game camera operator. That's just the beginning of where the challenges begin.
Right. And how does that relationship work between the observer room and the primary control room? Because I think that's where a lot of the questions start to come. Do you treat them as an island? Do you make sure they're integrated, almost like a 5th row or 4th row in the control room?
The interesting part is once the show starts, the TD is still doing some switching. Right. At the end of the day, you're literally handing it over to the observers. And a lot of the times, these observers are former pros that just know the game inside and out. A lot of times, they're really young, but you're literally trusting the broadcast at that point to them.
Right, yeah. Ben, same stuff. And it's interesting because while you guys you do several things, you are focused, obviously, on one league, one property primarily. Ben, you'll do a Rocket League event, and then you'll go and do a CSGO final in Boston, and I mean, these vary drastically. But again, compared to a stick and ball sport, what are some of the big differences you think?
I mean, I think the primary difference is what Mitch had talked about, that so much of our stream, so much of our broadcast is centered around the observer cam. And it really is, because you're telling the story of the game that's happening. Whereas if you show up in a traditional sport and all the jumbotrons went down, you could still watch the game. You could still sit and physically watch the players play whatever the game is. Whereas if our jumbotron goes down, if our LED goes down, you can't watch. There's nobody who's watching, in our audience who can actually watch the game. I think that's the first and foremost what it is. The other is another issue that he brought up about networking. We are so reliant on the digital platform, on this network infrastructure, that if for some reason that network goes down, game over. I mean, I guess it's similar to a rain out in a baseball game, something that you can't always control, that you have to have contingency plans for. Another one would actually be the length, too. A lot of our tournaments, and I know when, for Worlds, for League of Legends, for the ELEAGUE Major for us, for some of our qualifying, we'll be streaming for up to 12 hours. And that's actually live on the air, not the pre, not the post, not all of that. So I'd say the length of time as well. And the funny thing is, our fans, our viewers are engaged for that length of time. One of the differences is the longer we're on air, usually the more viewers we get. We don't see kind of the peak. You kind of build those stories up. So I think, where a lot of times you start watching an NFL game, by the end it kind of drops off. It's kind of the opposite when it comes to the digital world and when it comes to esports.
Right, you're not dealing with 2-hour TV windows, right? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, 2 hours, 1 hour, of our TBS, we go for about an hour for our broadcast.
I mean, like a football game where you're like, okay, here you go. I know it's there's no way in hell it's going to go beyond this period, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I've spent maybe 12, 16 hours on a couch watching an NFL Sunday too. So, but it's different broadcasts, not one continuous stream. So
Sure. Marc, similar question for you, but more about the in-venue experience. What do you think the big differences are for the in-venue esports experience as opposed to a football stadium or a basketball arena?
Well, I think the experience is similar in the sense that you have a lot of really happy people there screaming for their favorite team, and just the energy, the kinetic energy of people you can't beat no matter what type of sport you're experiencing. The difference is, to our point here that Ben is pointing out, you have really more of an immersive experience. You've got these giant jumbotrons in some cases, in case of Worlds, it's just wrapped around you. Faceit did something at Wembley Arena recently, which was basically a LED that went around all the way around the arena. And that idea of having to watch what's going on the screen, seeing the emotion of the players, plus having the kinetic energy of the people. And then, of course, you have folks that are taking pictures, they're streaming their own live video from the audience, they're texting, they're tweeting, they're engaging in the chat, and smart broadcasters will take that content and incorporate it into the broadcast experience itself. So they're participants in the narrative in real time, and they're in essence the storytellers of what's going on in the venue for those that aren't at the venue, who are experiencing at home. So I think that's a very distinctive difference than traditional sports.
And I'm always fascinated by the role that the casters play in venue, as well as obviously the stream. But the marriage of the live stream and the in-venue experience is much more aligned than in a traditional stick and ball sport, right, guys?
Yeah, I like to think of it as an opera. It's an opera. It's a ballet, and in essence of technology and people. It's not just what's going on in the traditional control room and what's happening in the in the observer room. You also have these really important people called the shoutcasters, and so you have a separate room that's just dedicated to them, and they're playing off of each other. Plus, you've got replay. And these things are all happening in different rooms at the same time, so they're all playing off of one another in a symphony, if you will, in order to communicate that message and get it out there. It's very different than a traditional broadcast room in that sense, because it's just one room, right? Maybe you have audio room and post-production. Here you have all these different areas. One similarity is still the analyst desk. They're out in the main area. And you're cutting to them at certain times. But during gameplay, it's really shoutcaster, observer room, what the director's doing, cutting different cameras, getting the fan reactions, and incorporating any type of narrative that's coming from the audience itself into the show.
Right.
I mean, if you go to a baseball game, how many people do you see with headphones in, right? Because they're listening to the play-by-play. You don't do that in esports. The play-by-play is piped into the room. You are a more communal part of the experience. Baseball, football, whatever, you're kind of segmented. You know, the person next to you might have a totally different experience. But when you come to esports, the person next to you is listening to the same shoutcaster, watching the same screen, being directed by the observer or the director. So it's a much more communal, directed kind of experience when you're actually in the venue.
Right, and it puts a huge weight on acoustics and making sure that your audio is up to snuff, because it's not just PA. You know, that's such an integral part of the show for the fans, right? Being able to hear the casters. That's where a lot of the excitement comes from.
Well, and from a media and technology solutions perspective in designing these facilities, just think about the audio for the game itself. The developers go through great strides to have 5.1 surround sound in a game. Can you deliver that in an arena for 2,500 people? That's something you have to think about and consider. I equate it to, it's like, you know, it's an EDM experience meets, you know, 11.1 surround sound of your favorite movie. It's just got that thunderous beat to it, but at the same time, you want to hear it behind you as well as in front of you.
Yep.
And kind of to your earlier point, not all esports are the same, right? They're totally different. So you might have one community who really doesn't care about the shoutcasters. They just want to hear the game sound. Some of them like the music in the game, some of them don't. Some of them want that shoutcaster piped in to really help follow the game. So it depends on the game, depends on the community, depends on the fan.
Yeah.
And to Marc's earlier point about just the actual viewing experience itself, that's like one of the hardest things for us is whenever we go into these venues, unless it's a turnkey solution with what's in Arlington or in Vegas, we have to do like major analysis on what the viewing angles are. It's competitive integrity also. We can't have them cheating, millions of dollars on the line. And then also on the audio component, we like to make sure that they feel the audio.
Yeah, you gotta feel it.
Right, but it's you're kind of starting from scratch. When you guys go on the road and you guys go to a traditional stadium, you're really, you know, starting with a blank piece of paper a lot of the time.
So the thing that 100%, and what we're trying to do now is to go back to venues so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time.
And Jamie, you guys came at it from a whole nother angle when you throw VR into all this and how that tells a story the way that you guys did at All-Star and some of the other real-world events. What were some of the challenges there and the complications there? Because it's very meta, right? You're telling a story of people in their own world with VR. You know, how did that kind of work?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we had to kind of follow what the audience was telling us and what the community was saying about the experience and what they wanted to get out of it. Obviously, we need to show both what was going on inside the headset, what was going on in the physical nature. You know, the fan is swinging a bat, so you want to show that action of them swinging a bat, but then you've got to cut back to the output, their performance, their hit. And then there's the narrative of it's just 1v1, it's head to head. And what we found from, you know, following the stream chat and following social media is that personalities were coming out and people were following specific competitors and they were really watching to see who was going to win. You know, they enjoyed the game and you see a home run, one person hits a home run, the other person doesn't hit a home run, and that's easy to understand. But they were really following the storylines and championing their competitor, following it all the way through. So for us, it was, you talk about a symphony or an opera, you know, weaving between social, you know, the social communication and making sure you're bringing the audience engaged into it, and then what's going on inside the headset with the synthetics, the physical action, and then obviously whether it be the showcasters or, you know, the analysts, just trying to wrap all that up and not get in the way of the experience and really be able to let the fans experience it in its natural way.
Yeah, and we got a little clip. I wanted to separate that out a little bit from everybody else, but let's get a look at what Jamie's talking about here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever MLB Home Run Derby VR Championship Edition. We are live from All-Star Week here in the nation's capital.
These are the best of the best over the last 3 days. It's going to be extremely exciting. They are neck and neck right now.
Joe Chuck on his final swing! What a victory! Congratulations. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MLB Home Run Derby VR Little League Challenge. We are here at the home and birthplace of Little League Baseball, Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Today, we are so excited to have representatives from all teams in the 2018 Little League World Series.
They're all going nuts over here. The gold ball, here it is.
Line drive, the rights are going to stay in the air. Catches fire at the end, and he wins.
We are just outside the Tokyo Dome right now. We are at the HR DVR activation right outside. There's so much stuff going on here. It's like a huge festival.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Very cool. And you brought up a point that I think is another differentiator for esports, and that's real-time feedback, right? I mean, the way that Twitch works, for better or worse, right, guys? And you know, and most of the, as well as YouTube Gaming or any of the other channels, is you get feedback that second. And a lot of times, am I wrong? You guys are taking that feedback and adjusting on the fly, right? I mean, you take that into your production sometimes, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the number one thing that we are making esports fans is esports for are the fans, for the viewers. So if there's something, and especially with ELEAGUE, where we kind of step across so many different communities, the fighting game community, the MOBA genre, we want to listen to those fans and give the best possible stories, the best possible production. So if they're noticing something that's maybe off, something that they prefer in the community, absolutely we take that into account.
Right. And the stories, like I was saying, the stories are evolving during the competition. So by being engaged with the community, you're able to then get feedback and then maybe steer the conversation towards what's coming back from the community. It's really a two-way street, unlike traditional stick and ball sports.
Right.
We are telling the story. It's really a communal experience, and you want to kind of have that balance between driving a narrative of your direction you had when you started this, and then following where the action is and getting that fan feedback.
Yeah, it's that two-way road, right? I mean, like that's just a huge difference. Mitch, do you guys, you know, monitor that and adapt accordingly?
100%. It's the producers are constantly just, and like as you said, some of it is really bad on what you see, but at times you do get like amazing feedback. It's like, I'd rather be looking at this, or I want to hear like what the expertise is around what that one play was. You're absolutely taking in all of it at the same time. Filtering it is the problem, because it's endless.
Right. And I will say that having watched a lot at this point, a lot of them are just masters of profanity. Just really wordsmiths when it comes to the F word.
Too.
Yeah. I want to hopefully get to a couple questions. If anybody has questions out there. Everybody's waiting for Mark Lazarus. Oh, there's one in the middle right there, but I'm going to ask a question while the mic goes over there. Mitch, specifically with you, because I did want to get in on this. Your guys' at-home production workflow, maybe you can detail some of that, because I think that in particular would be of interest to this audience. You guys at the Mid-Season Invitational and then at the Worlds are doing a lot over public internet sometimes. You're doing a lot with your LA facility, and correct me if I'm wrong, but at Worlds you guys went from a few trucks to zero, essentially, right?
Correct. Our technical team really, like 2 years ago, we started analyzing overall where our spend was going and like where can we streamline. And we have a really great advantage is Riot and Direct, which actually helps deliver the game.
What's your guys' gaming network, right? Yeah.
And we had conversations with them, and we actually realized that we could tap into that in order to do the transmission. And working with Ray Panahone and then the rest of the technical team at home, we were actually able to get our bandwidth requirements down using certain technology supplied by actually iVision. And we're able to do at-home production now. It's helped us reduce costs dramatically, lets people stay home, they can sleep on their own beds. And also, we've built out a really amazing facility in North America, and we get to continue to utilize it.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things about esports as well, especially with your guys' properties, is this is a global thing. This is not a regionalized thing. The way that we think that the NFL is the biggest thing in the world, yes, of course, it's very, very large. It's a multi-billion-dollar property, but it doesn't mean quite as much to people in Korea or Thailand or China. With you guys, that's the absolute opposite. So these at-home productions are allowing you to expand globally, and let's be honest, it just wouldn't make sense for you guys to build a facility in all these different countries. It's just not possible, right?
100%. And talking with the China team, and they're doing a home and away now. So they're actually traveling back and forth between studios, and they actually have their main production hub in Shanghai. In order to, if they were going to build 10 control rooms, it just sustainability just wouldn't be there.
Right. Sure. Question in the middle somewhere? Oh, if you guys can pot them up.
Mic on?
There we go.
Hey, this question is actually for Mitch. Mitch, you guys make the games. which puts you in an interesting position to embrace new technologies in a way that maybe the auditoriums themselves can't, or the broadcasters. I'm curious, are you guys looking at SMPTE 2110 and the idea of like spitting actual broadcast video feeds out of the game engine itself to really fully integrate with the broadcast workflow?
Were you listening to a conversation 2 days ago?
Maybe.
Absolutely. Our technical leads have actually been talking a lot about that. And as far as like integrating that technology, League has been around for a while now, so we got to work with the game developers. But right now we're still Riot Game, not Riot Games. But we've got other products that are going to be coming down the pipe, and we're absolutely looking to integrate certain technologies to streamline for sure.
Anybody else out there? Got a bit of a lightning round question that I will get to. Okay, cool. So guys, we did not have enough time to touch on a lot of things that I wanted to touch on, but I wanted to make sure that we got to this. We're almost at the end of 2018. We're heading into 2019. What is a major development, a major trend that you guys think that we're going to see when it comes to this space? It's evolving so quickly. Just ridiculously quickly. So it can be technology, it can be production, it could be a business vertical. Ben, I'm going to put you on the spot over here. What's a big thing we're going to see in 2019?
Well, I don't know if it'll be 2019, but 2019, 2020. We talked a little bit about how much the game is part of the broadcast, right? You have the wraparound segments, the pregame, the postgame, but that's still a small percentage of the actual streamer broadcast. I'm interested to see how much non-endemic and endemic sponsors work their way into the game. You look at something like Fortnite, which had the NFL uniforms. You look at something like Rocket League that has like a Rick and Morty skins. So with so much of these broadcasts, so much of these streams being about the game, if I'm an advertiser, I could see them wanting to get into the game more and more.
Yeah, and it's a genuine opportunity to reach an audience that, let's face it, it's hard to reach with traditional mediums at this point, right? Nobody has a cable subscription anymore on that that's tuning into esports for the most part. Marc, you're up next.
It's an interesting question. Being an OG, original gamer, we all started out on our Odyssey systems, and then arcade quarter games, and then Doom was my big first game, LAN game. I think you'll definitely see more advancement in AR gaming that mixes actual technology with human interaction, VR gaming as well. The quality of the storytelling, the narrative, and the worlds from multiplayer games is going to increase. There'll be more of them, there'll be more people. I think from a business perspective, and this might be just because it's our business, I think that we'll be seeing a lot more LAN centers out there and certainly more stadiums. You'll see ground-up builds that are entire buildings dedicated to esports and gaming, entire areas like LA Live that are just all about that one function. But I think the LAN centers will be the modern arcade, and they'll be very experiential.
Right, and that was a word that you've used a lot when you and I have talked, experiential. The idea that, yeah, you're going to watch a sporting event, essentially, watching a live event, let's say, but it goes well beyond that for this type of
I don't think it's watching, you're participating.
Right.
You're fully immersed in it, you're in an environment that could be completely branded Riot. It could be a Riot LAN gaming center. Yeah, you might be able to play other games there, but everything there is that theme, just like you might see, the New York Knicks store, for example, or the ESPN stores. There'll be a lot more of that retail, F&B, community vibe experience, just like the sports bar that you see today. I mean, without a question, you'll be seeing the Hard Rock Cafe of esports pretty soon.
Cool. Mitch, what do you think?
I totally agree with Marc, especially on the last point. We actually just built out a new studio in Korea, and that's exactly what it is. It's a place where they can go, socialize, play games, watch competitive play, and then go grab a cup of coffee, grab a snack at the same time. I definitely see that as the future of it's the next sports bar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've talked a lot about at various events about how esports differs because you can watch a live esports event, and then you can go home and try to replicate it a hell of a lot better than you can try to go home and replicate Odell Beckham Jr. Although I can be kind of pissy sometimes, so I could probably do that. But in that case, you are building a venue where you're able to do that, right? Where you are able to game as well as watch game, at the same time. It's very, very cool. Jamie, we're all curious what MLB has in the future when it comes to esports, but in general, what do you think is going to happen in the next year or two?
Well, I concur with what the sentiment here. I think that esports and competitive gaming is a very social experience, a very communal experience. And right now, a lot of that's being digested at home. But these fans all have, friends and social experiences, and they want to share this together. And right now, Twitch is a great place for them to kind of get together, but it's a bit toxic at times, and you can't really necessarily engage on a one-to-one with some of your friends as you're doing it. So you're going to see a lot of stuff. Topgolf announced last night that they're putting like 13 of their locations or something like that are going to have mini esports studios inside there. And I just think when you look at Topgolf, it's a great example of an industry where you'd go out to a driving range years ago and you just buy a bucket of balls for whatever, $6, $8. You hit the balls, you go home. And now it's like Lucky Strike Deluxe kind of thing where you go there, it's fully interactive, it's fully engaging, it's a social experience in addition to a physical experience. And I think that's going to really be the model for how a real good esports venue would be. Not necessarily something where you're going to have a big broadcast, because those are going to be specialty, but where you can go and go with your friends, experience kind of, in the old days, a Chuck E. Cheese, maybe now it's Dave & Buster's, but what's next beyond just dropping $1 in an arcade and playing for 5 minutes? What can you do socially? And I think the social media kind of audience out there, they're looking for experiences that are going to go a little bit deeper and a little bit beyond what they're getting now, and I think that there's a big appetite to build that.
Very cool, guys. Well, we're extremely excited about this space. We're dedicating a lot of editorial resources to this. We'll have another esports event next year. But SVG is all in with esports, and I encourage everybody out there to get a second to corner these guys and talk to them a little one-on-one.